She is spineless, shameless, and completely aimless.
Around about 18,000 families are going to be around about £14,000 a year better off than they are now with money for absolutely nothing, which everyone else will pay for. Just when you thought things couldn't get any worse, we get this monumental betrayal of the British public with an additional £26 billion in tax rises on working people, despite all the promises that they won't tax working people, despite all the promises that they won't increase taxes anymore after the record-breaking £40 billion of tax rises that Reeves did last year. £26 billion. And so in this video, I'm going to tear that apart as to what they tell you and what actually happens, which you'll be forgiven for thinking is dishonest, deceitful, and downright financially illiterate. So let's take a look at this. But first of all, I could do no better than to encapsulate the overall sense of all this by playing to you a short snippet of Kemi Badenoch's speech just earlier on today. Have a listen to this.
It's extraordinary. It tells you everything you need to know about her grip on the Treasury. She's making the UK a shambolic laughingstock to international investors, and if she doesn't resign for breaking her promises, she should sure as hell go for this. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, what have we got for all this chaos and disorder? There are 1 million more people claiming universal credit than there were at the time of the last budget. Government spending, up. Welfare spending, up. Universal credit claimants, up. Unemployment, up. Debt interest, up. Inflation, up. And what about the things that you want to go up? What about the things you want to go up? Growth, down. Investment, down. Business confidence, down. The credibility of the Chancellor, and not just down, through the floor. These figures are shocking. Does she really think that anyone will be confused by the sleight of her hand that she had in her speech? Her speech today was an exercise in self-delusion. Today, she had an opportunity to apologize and show some humility. Instead, we've been fed puff pieces in the Times and the FT. All we've had is wallowing in self-pity and whining about misogyny and mansplaining. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me explain to the Chancellor, woman to woman. People out there aren't complaining because she's female. They're complaining because she is utterly incompetent. Real equality means being held to the same standard as everyone else. It means being judged on results. Take her bright idea, the Office for Value for Money. It's been closed down because it didn't save a penny. In fact, it cost the taxpayer £1.6 million. You couldn't make this stuff up. Madam Deputy Speaker, I've identified a way to save taxpayers huge amounts of money by sacking just one person, the woman sitting opposite. The ex-chief economist of the Bank of England was not mansplaining. He wasn't mansplaining when he said the uncertainty around today's budget is the single biggest reason growth has flatlined. What did the Chancellor think would happen when she went on breakfast telly to do an emergency public service announcement? I interrupt your Cheerios to bring you this frightening message about income tax. And then, unbelievably, she changed her mind 3 days later. No wonder people are in despair. She says she wants people to respect her. Madam Deputy Speaker, she says she wants people to respect her. Respect is earned. She apparently told Labour MPs this week, I'll show the media, I'll show the Tories, I will not let them beat me. Show us what? Making stuff up at the dispatch box, incompetence, chaos, and the highest tax burden in history. She said to them, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll be there on Wednesday, I'll be there next year, and I'll be back the year after that. God help us. She is spineless, shameless, and completely aimless.
So let's take a look at the major headlines, what they tell you versus what it really means, and take a brutally honest look at what's really happened today. Because they will sell it to many people as a massive positive, and some people will believe that. A lot of people, maybe even some of you watching, will believe that some of the things that she says is a real win and a real positive. I know that there's a lot of people in the Labour camp that think this is all a big positive thing, but with great respect to many of them, I think a lot of it is just deluded misunderstanding and wishful thinking. Let's take a look at the big broad headlines. So the increase is around 26 to 30 billion pounds, which is a record increase by the end of this decade, which will equate to something in the region of 38% of GDP by 2030 or 2031. That is the equivalent of every pound produced by this economy, 38%, therefore 38 pence, being taken in tax for every single pound produced. A lot of this is going to be via stealth taxes, which I'll talk a bit more about in a minute. I also talk a lot about money and finance on my wealth channel, Daniel Shensmith, linked below. Check that out. So let's look at some of the spend headlines and what they say is going to happen, what they want to happen, why they say it's a positive, but in reality, what that is really going to mean for a lot of other people. Now, despite all the promises, as I said, not to increase taxes at all, again, and certainly not to increase taxes on working people, these taxes are going to be paid by people who are working. Let's make absolutely no mistake whatsoever at the outset. It is people that are working that are going to pay these taxes, and largely in part for the people who are not working. Let's take a look at some of these things, shall we? So here's a brutally honest look. Now, income tax and national insurance thresholds frozen further to 2030, 2031. And what they say is we are not raising these basic rates of income tax or national insurance. The thresholds remain where they are to provide stability and to help us to get the debt down. In reality, that creates a stealth tax, a fiscal drag, because wages, salaries, are usually going to rise with inflation. They don't always, but they really should do. But so they will rise generally with inflation, meaning more people are going to pay more tax and more people are going to be dragged into higher tax bands, paying more tax when their money is worth less. So we have inflation on the one hand, obviously making the money it being worth less than it was before. But with the tax thresholds remaining the same, more people are therefore going to be dragged into higher tax brackets. And you get this really odd quirk right on the edge, on the band of some of these things, where people being given a tax rise actually take home less because they move into another tax bracket. So it doesn't work out. So some people that I know have actually decided to work fewer hours on the increased rate because they would get less money at the end of the day. But by and large, this freeze is going to represent one of the single largest stealth tax rises in post-war history, raising tens of billions of pounds, all paid by people who are working, hitting largely median earners, those that are earning reasonable salaries, but quietly they're going to pay much more tax, along with pensioners, whilst it won't be in the headlines because it's by stealth. By the very nature of it, it is not up in the big headlines, but they will ultimately be paying a tax rise at the end of it all. Mansion taxes. Now, on the face of it, many people might think, well, if someone has a house that's worth more than £2 million, they can afford to pay more and they should pay more. What they will say and how they sell it to you is they will say, well, the rich can obviously afford to pay this and those with broad shoulders should pay a bit more. And therefore, it's a thoroughly fair tax on those with the most expensive homes and those that are in the top bands. The reality is, however, many properties across London and in the southeast are going to get hit hard, and they might be cash poor but asset rich households because the property might be expensive, but they may not have the cash to pay this. So if they are paying thousands of pounds a year extra, they simply may not be afford to do so. Landlords likely are going to pass on these costs in higher rents because that is a natural consequence. If something becomes more expensive, someone somewhere has to pay for it. They can't just magic up the money. So this is going to worsen affordability for those renting houses, and thus these surcharges on top of an already broken system is just going to make things worse. Next, higher taxes on property income, savings and dividend income. Now, they will tell you that it's fair that if someone is wealthy and they've got property income, dividend income and savings, etc., that is fair that they are taxed a little bit more like income from work that we all do. So that is how they'll sell it to you. But in reality, small business owners and retirees who are either living off dividends or savings or have some sort of small income from property are going to see a hit on their income from all of those aspects. It's going to discourage investment. It's going to discourage any kind of risk taking and setting up of businesses. It's going to make it less incentivized, less profitable. Pensioners and other people who have been really careful, carefully saved, carefully invested, carefully and diligently built businesses and sacrificed many things over many years to build and acquire those things are going to feel like they are being punished and penalized for doing really the responsible thing and putting their things in order and taking care of their situation over a long period of time. Salary sacrifices and pension clampdowns with a £2,000 cap and charging national insurance. Now, again, what they will say versus the reality. What they say is that they're going to close loopholes and so that very high earners can't shelter some of this income through salary sacrifice schemes, and ordinary savers aren't affected, they will say. In reality, £2,000 is a very low cap, and a lot of normal sort of middle of the range workers use salary sacrifice for pensions, for cycle schemes, EV schemes, and all sorts of other things, and they will all get caught. Charging national insurance above that is essentially a tax, again, on people being prudent, saving for their pension. Over time, again, this is going to just erode any attractiveness of employer pensions and contributions, which in turn translates into a worse retirement outcome for all of those that are being diligent and careful, and thus more reliance on the state system, because if they don't have it themselves and they haven't been able to save for it themselves, they'll be more reliant on the state later on. Minimum wage, I mentioned, they will tell you it's great. On the one hand, they can sell it to say more younger people will get a better national minimum and living wage. What they'll say is we are giving millions of people a pay rise, millions of young people a pay rise, ensuring that work pays, incentivizing work, higher minimum wages, boosting living standards, etc. But the reality is, as with anything else, if you make it more expensive, fewer people will do it. That's why very niche things that are very expensive are done by very few people. So if we have an increase in the cost of employing people, we have a decrease usually in the number of people employed. Now, that's great if the economy is booming and growing and everything else, and it can support it, much like if your income increases and you can support buying nicer things. But when it isn't growing, when the economy is not growing and inflation is growing, then this is just making it more expensive to hire people when you're forcing an increase in those wages. The natural result is small and medium businesses, and particularly hospitality businesses and retail businesses that are heavily reliant on the workforce, are going to struggle to find the extra costs to absorb the existing staff, let alone taking on new staff. So many people are going to expect fewer hours or no hours at all. There's quite likely to be hiring freezes, pay rise freezes, more automation, more reliance on AI and things that are much, much cheaper. Speaking of AI and making things cheaper, I am working on an AI automated system called BlackBeltBarrister Pro, which at the moment I am running an early bird deal, $9.99 a month. I'll link it below. It doesn't replace legal advice, but what it will do is save you a huge amount of money by answering you questions. You have a question, whether it's a parking charge, whether it's a consumer product that you've got, whether it's a car that's gone wrong, someone is not paying you, or they won't put something right, or you've got a problem with your council tax or TV license, whatever it might be. There'll be an agent for all of those. I'm training them based on legislation, on case law, my experience, my draft templates, my draft notes, obviously without any real information. All of this is going in there. It's going to be trained. It's going to answer your questions, not as a replacement for legal advice, but it is certainly going to make it a darn sight cheaper for you to get these answers much more quickly so you know where you are standing. So that link will be in the description below. It'll be launched very, very soon. Grab yourself the early bird discount. It's linked below. But that is my way of making things cheaper, because I get countless hundreds of emails of asking different questions and I can't reply to them all. And it would be hundreds of pounds to provide as formal legal advice, but you can get an answer very quickly using that service. Now, let's talk about the two-child benefit cap. Now, at the moment, there is a cap to 2 children for benefits. Now, what they will say, what every Labour MP has said, is that they want to lift this cap on child benefits from 2 children to limitless. What they will say is that this will raise and lift 450,000 children out of poverty and make the benefit system fairer to larger families. Now, the blunt reality is, for many, many families, they just don't have larger families anymore. If they have no children, or 1 child, or 2 children, they are then, in turn, if they work, are going to be paying essentially for everyone else that has more than 2 children, that can't afford more than 2 children. That is not being disrespectful, it's just putting it bluntly. So on the one hand, they will tell you that they are lifting 450,000 children out of poverty. But in reality, is that really going to happen? Because £26 for the eldest child and £17.25 for each additional child per week is probably not going to go very far. I would suggest it's something, but it's not going to lift someone magically out of poverty for £26 a week or £17 for each subsequent child. What it does mean, however, is that around about 18,000 families are going to be around about £14,000 a year better off than they are now with money for absolutely nothing, which everyone else will pay for, which again is a tax on working people. So this is not me even needing to pick a side on this. You can decide for yourself whether that sounds fair or not. Everyone else that either doesn't have children or has 1 child or 2 children or cannot feel that they afford more than 1 or 2 children or don't afford children at all, they by working will in turn be paying for some of the families that have 6 or more children to the tune of £14,000 a year. There are 18,000 families that are going to receive £14,000 a year extra on top of what they already get. So like I said, there'll be more analysis on this on my money channel, Daniel Shansmith, linked below. Go check that out. But at the moment, just don't let them mislead you. This is an absolute fiasco of deceit and dishonesty, in my opinion. And I make that statement because of how many times they have said that they are not coming back for more. They don't need to do any more tax rises. That's it. They wipe the slate clean. All of those are the words of Rachel Reeves. And that is why I think this is completely dishonest and deceitful. And it is just a complete U-turn and a betrayal to a large chunk of the British public. It is a tax. It is very much a tax on working people because everyone who is working is ultimately going to pay for this. Even those taxes that are upon businesses are going to be paid for by working people because I take it on high assurance from real economists, it all comes from the productivity of the employee, always and every time. It is the employee who ultimately pays for it all. So let me know what you think your reaction is to this budget. And as always, thank you for watching.